There we go. If you go to today's Moodle page, under the exercises, really the only thing you need to download is the sketch JPEG, and this is the angel in itself. I'm going to show you how to set up a document in Photoshop specifically to do digital painting. You got to think a little bit differently about it. It's a little bit like drawing and a little bit like painting, but there's some things that you can get away with or not get away with. So I'm just going to kind of go through this entire thing and you'll see how I would set it up and work with it. First thing, I'm going to make a new document. So File and New. Whenever you do a digital illustration, I highly recommend working in the RGB color mode. Why do you think RGB versus CMYK?
Because you're looking at it on the computer.
Yeah. The main thing is you're going to be looking at this on the computer. Now you can print it off from CMYK. The other reason is RGB does a lot better with color blending than CMYK does. This gives you a fuller range of colors. So we're going to keep it on that one, and the size should be 8x8, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 8x8, 300 DPI RGB color mode. We'll say OK to this. I'm going to close out my previous one just so it doesn't work on there. I'm also going to open up my layers. This is what we're going to work on. The second thing is, if you didn't know about this, you can go to Window, down to Workspace, and I've already saved up my, my workspace for doing digital illustrations and doing different things. By default, most people use the Essentials. And the Essentials, watch out if I click on it, will rearrange all of my palettes and open up the appropriate palettes that you most commonly use. Other type of workspaces, if you're doing paintings, motion graphics, doing typography, if I chose that one, notice what it opens up. It gives me my character palettes and my most commonly used things for typography. The best thing I like about this is if I have certain palettes that I use more often, you can go to New Workspace and you can save it. So if I open up the palettes that I like to work with, choose New Workspace, and this gives you the ability to give it a name. I'm going to hit Cancel. And that's where I saved Ben's digital illustration. So when I hit that, it opens up exactly the palettes that I want to work with. Cool? If you want to do digital illustration, I would highly recommend working in painting mode. And this will open up your brush presets, which we'll get into. And where is it? Oh, come on. There we go. My brushes palette. And we'll get into the things you can do with paint brushes today. That's the first thing. So getting it set up. Next thing I need to do, let's place the sketch into our document. Normally I like to do the place. This time I'm just going to drag it and drop it onto here. Remember, when you do this, you need to hit the check mark at the top because it's going to make it as a smart object. Let's move my layers so we can see what we're working with. So this sketch is just kind of a rough sketch of the idea. We're going to go back and clean it up. So I don't want to see it in this rough form. We're going to add on to it and go around the edges. What I like to do is, I've got this on one layer. I'm going to make another layer on top of it. Everything we do has its own layer. So on layer 1, I'm going to rename it. Remember, you can double click, and we're going to call this one Outlines. From here, I'm going to create my outlines on top of it. And I'm mainly just going to be using our paintbrush to work from, brush tool. Let's get fancy. Go over the brush tool options. Of course, you know, at the very top, these are all your options you can work with. If you hit the drop down, you've got a variety of different brushes to choose. Some of them are nice and textured. Some of these are patterns. Somebody's obviously loaded up a bunch of Christmas tree type things you can work with. I'm going to choose just a basic round brush. And you know, you can change the size of it and the hardness of it as well. And there's the size of that. If I want to make it a little bigger, there we go. The next thing you need to be aware of is the opacity that you're working with. Right now, I've got, let's load up black as my foreground color. If I'm painting at 100% black, that's what it would look like. If I'm painting with lower opacity, this is what it looks like. The thing about opacity is, if I do a lower one, I can build up the way it looks. So now it's like I have the ability to shade with it. Cool? Especially if I drop the hardness of my brush. So if I dropped it down to 0, got a very soft edge brush, Now, multiple clicks, I can build up and really start to shade in the areas that I'm working with. That's the essence of what we're doing. Change the opacity, change the size, and the hardness. For this first layer, I'm going to keep my hardness very hard and keep the brush size relatively small. What we're going to do is we're going to outline and clean up this sketch. Let's take it a step further. So we can change the opacity. Let's keep that up. I'm not going to worry with these extra ones. Those, if you have a pressure-sensitive stylus, those come in handy. I'm just going to be using my mouse. Instead, I'm going to open up my brush presets from here. You don't just have to keep your brush nice and round from here. This gives you the option to change up not just the size and hardness of it, but also the roundness of it. So if I wanted to make something be a little bit more calligraphic, I can adjust that. And I can even adjust the angle at which it's at. So now I've got a brush that looks more something like that. Pretty cool? Very, very simple, very easy to do. And these type of brushes make it pretty easy to change on the fly what you're doing. Let's see, so let's make one a little bit larger, a little bit smaller from here. All of this is found under the brush tip shape. And you can do this to just about any brush that you have. I think even some of these textured brushes. So for this one, well, yeah, would do that. Let's see what happens if I squished it, rotated it. So I get something that looks like that. Pretty cool. If I need to, let's say if I was to like select another brush and then go back to it, notice that it'll kind of pull up the default again, then I have to redo it again. If I want to save a brush, let's see, I can click down here and this will save the presets that I created. So let's choose one of these. I'll make it calligraphic. That one looks pretty good. If I wanted to save it, click here, and this will say, there we go, give me the name of a brush, and we'll call this Ben's Hard Elliptical Brush. Now I've got it saved down here at the bottom. I can quickly choose it again. Oh goodness. Did it save? There it is. Now I can add on to that. All cool? That's the basics of being able to change up your brush dynamics. Now let's apply it to what we have. Go through and outline the rest of your drawing. This is where kind of that hand-eye coordination comes in. You can change the size of it. Do y'all remember what the keyboard shortcut to change the size of your brush is on the fly? The bracket keys. Next to the P are the bracket keys. Open and close will make it larger or smaller on the fly. The bracket keys. So if I needed it larger, open bracket or close bracket, smaller, close bracket from there. And all I'm doing is just kind of going back over and cleaning up this sketch. Y'all go away, I'm having fun.
Are we just coloring that sketch, or do we have to make our own?
Just this sketch for the exercise. If you want to add on to this sketch or be more creative, that is totally up to you. I'm mainly looking for your ability to use the brushes that we're working with. And I am going kind of fast, so you don't have to watch me do this entire thing. It doesn't have to be in solid black. You can choose a different color outline. You can change up the dynamics of your brush. So instead of it going one way, change it up and let it go the other way. I wish I had brought my digital stylus with me today.
Can we use those in class?
Yes, you may use those in class. You may have to install some software, which I'm okay with. Those of you who signed up for my digital illustration class, y'all get to go into a little bit more depth on using those.
Is that class in here?
It is in here, yes. Like I said, I'm just going quick so I can show you from here. Forgot her face. See, check that out. If I did that with a round brush, I wouldn't get that thick and thin kind of line as I moved around. Changing up the width of the brush allows me to make more of a artistic type statement. Also, just kind of the way I work with both hands when I do my painting. One hand on the mouse, the other hand is on my keyboard. So I know very quickly how to change size of the brush, style of the brush, all that good stuff. Okay, we'll call that one done for now. Here's what I've got. Outline layer's got the outlines. If I turned off that one, this is what it looks like. Not too bad, okay? It's a good start for what we have. Now let's add on more to it. Here's the third part. Give yourself a textured background. If you've ever taken Mr. Smathers' painting class, one of the things he likes students to do is not to paint on a white background, right? Did y'all ever experience that? Give yourself, huh? What does he say about backgrounds? How does he do his?
They just make you put
Put some other color down. Usually it's the opposite of whatever your dominant color is going to be. So if you got like a really green, he'll want you to do red. But it depends. We're going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to give myself just a background, something that's not white. Doesn't have to be opposite of it. So let's choose, in this case, I'm going to get a nice big old brush. We'll make it really soft. And, oh, let's go back to, yeah, there we go. Nice round brush. Bigger the brush, obviously, the more area you can quickly cover. And let's change my fill color to, I'll make it blue. Now I'm just going to fill in this background layer. So now I'm not working with white. All I did was just change up the background. From here, you don't even have to keep it a solid background. Choose an analogous color, choose lighter and darker tints and shades. Just kind of hit it a little bit from here, maybe a little bit darker. You can also adjust the opacity to help you build up spots. Looking kind of ugly right now. Not done. Did you know that, y'all ever watch The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross? Happy Tree Guy? Those are in the public domain now. You can watch every one of them online for free.
Mr. Smathers says he's more of a hobbyist painting.
He is, that's true.
Take him too seriously.
Like, you can learn everything you need to know about Bob Ross in 3 episodes.
He's really sweet though. He's like emotionally nice to me. He's like if you're ever like feeling bad, just like look up on YouTube the Bob Ross song. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's so funny. Like they did a little PBS did a little song tribute to
Oh,
Bob
yeah,
Ross.
they auto-tuned it and stuff?
Yes,
Yeah, I know
and
what
it's
you're talking about.
so like and it takes every inspirational thing that he ever said and it's so cool. It's like this is
Okay.
your world.
That's amazing.
Good little textured background. It's not a solid color. All I did was play around with the opacity, play around with different lights and dark colors, and all I used was a simple brush. Here's kind of a tip. You see a lot of people do digital illustrations, and you would think, oh man, I've got to have just tons and tons of these cool brushes to work with. The truth is, most digital illustrations just use the simple round brush. You can get away with everything you need to do with just that brush. However, you can still use textures if you want to. We'll get into that in just a second. Here's the second thing. The fourth thing. Block in the figure's colors. Next thing we're going to do is to treat this like it's kind of a coloring book. Go back over to your layers palette, and in between the background and the outlines, I'm going to make a new layer. So, new layer. From here, this layer, we're going to call that, what did I call it? Block colors. This is where I'm going to start filling in the colors. I'm not going to want to work on my outlines. I want it to be on a different layer. Got my solid color. Change it to a really, really hard brush. We'll drop the size of it. Let's start filling her in. Fill in the different areas. She's wearing a dress. She's got a heart, the face, the wings, her hair. All of that can have its own color. I've got my swatches pulled up, so this is kind of a quick way of choosing some colors, so I'll keep that handy. Let's see what we can do. So maybe I'll make her dress. I think in the past I've made it purple. And all I'm doing is I'm filling in her dress. Just that. Treat it like it was a coloring book. Remember, you can make your brush much, much smaller to get into those little small corners. Much, much bigger to fill in larger areas. Here's her dress. I'll do the heart. Here's another quick little tip. You've also got your paint bucket tool. With paint bucket, however, got to be careful with it. Make sure continuous is on and all layers is checked off. The reason why is you want it to look for all the layers and you don't want it to go everywhere. You want it to stay confined. And if you've got any areas that are closed off, like it looks like her arm is nice and closed off, no open gaps. Let's give her kind of a light skin tone. I can click in here and be able to quickly fill in those areas. Now it's looking for lights and darks, so maybe I need to adjust my tolerance. Obviously that's too small. Let's do 50. Oops, not 5. 50. Now I can quickly fill in those areas. So instead of using a paintbrush to paint it in, the fill bucket will give you a lot better areas. Now watch what happens if I try to fill it in on the face. See how it got all of that? A little bit too much. If that's the case, I want it to stop right here. I'm going to use my paintbrush and just paint in that particular area. Now when I swap back over to my fill bucket, I can click in and fills it in very quickly too. So I'm swapping back and forth between those two tools. By the way, the keyboard shortcut to pick up your paintbrush is B for brush. Keyboard shortcut to pick up your fill bucket is G to swap between those two. Let's do the wing. So if I did the wing, get my paintbrush, I'm going to just do the outlines, hit it, hit it. Oh, don't even need to do that. Swap over to G. Now it fills in quite quickly. Great, great way of doing that. Let's give her some orange hair. Let's see. I didn't get her neck, obviously. We'll fill all that in with just orange. This is my drawing. Don't you judge me. There we go. So, got it all blocked in. No shadows, no highlights, no details just yet. Just your basic form colors to work with. Now let's add the details to the figure. Make yourself one more layer, okay? It's going to be on top of the background layer. This one we're going to call details. Do you understand why we're making layers for everything that's on here? If I did everything in one layer, if I messed up, it's difficult. I got to paint back over it. If I mess up on the details, I can erase it, and I'm not worrying about my background or my colors or my outline. From here, you can choose your brush. Let's pick up the colors. If I need to add shadows, obviously I'm going to choose a little bit darker color than what's originally there. If you want to get really artistic, don't just make it a darker color, make it an analogous color. Drop it down to a little bit more blue. So that's a good contrast between those two. And you can paint it off to see maybe a little bit darker. Here's the other thing. So I was telling you about the shading. Make the hardness very, very soft. Drop your opacity. Now I can go back in and start shading the areas that I'm working in. Pretty cool? Pretty cool. Since I dropped my opacity, I can fill it in quite quick. If I need to, I can go back and clean up the way it looks. Change the size of your brush. Maybe start making it a little bit darker. It's taking me several clicks to build up the darkness that I like. All that's just in the purple that I'm working with. If I need highlights, go the opposite direction. Maybe some purple highlights. Let's make it lighter. hot pink highlights. There we go. I like from there. The lighting on this is horrible. It's underneath and on the top side. Don't tell Mr. Smathers. Don't tell Dr. Miley. Same way for this particular area. Here's another tip for you. If I start painting inside of here, I'm probably going to run into that area as well. If I grab my selection tool, I'm going to use my magic wand tool. With the magic wand, I can select this color area, and wherever I paint, it'll stay inside that color area. If I need to, I can hold down Shift and add on to it. Now check out what happens when I grab my brush. We'll make it really, really light so you can see what's going on. Up the opacity of it. Now if I start to paint, notice that it stays inside of that particular area. I'm not running into a different one. If I chose a darker area, it's going to stay inside there and not get onto that. Oh, that looks bad. So I can keep working on it. Hey, if I don't like it, grab my eraser and I can erase that away and I don't have to worry about the background. Just keep redoing it, do it over again. You can work with textured brushes. So let's say I wanted to add some texture to her hair. This is where these come in. Let's show you some of the more dynamic things you can do with these. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So this brush, let's choose a darker one. Whoops. Hang on a second, what's going on? Grouped it, that's why. There we go. So with this brush, it looks like this. And it looks pretty good if I just click. You know, it's got texture, but if I click and drag, it's going to look like that. Not exactly what I want. What I want to do is I want that texture to be scattered about. Here's where the rest of your brush dynamics come in. Again, looking for the brush presets, shape dynamics. When I click on this, let's see, will allow me to change up the size of it, the jitter of it. So the size will become larger and smaller by 50%. Let's see what that looks like. It's sort of getting there. Let's do some scattering. It's got it checked off. There we go. This gives me a little preview of what it looks like. So if I scatter it more or less, there we go, scatter count. That's what I want. I can make it scatter about a little bit more. So now, really fills it up. Let's make it really small. That's a great way of creating that. This is kind of where you're playing around with it. Angle, so if I change the angle, it's going to rotate things. Count. Too much. Scatter it on both axes. Yeah. That's the stuff right there. It's like exploding. There we go. So now when I start using this brush, let's make it 100% so you can see what I'm working with. One click gives me all of this. Pretty cool? So now if I choose the color that I want, not necessarily what I want to do with it, but I can confine it to an area, maybe not scatter so much, and I can paint that texture into a certain area. Change up the opacity of it, drop it down. And I'm just playing around with it for now. You can start to see why the rounded brushes tend to be a little bit better as far as, because it gives you more control. But it's difficult to do some of the things. Adding more texture onto that. Let's look at the original one that I had from here. So this was my first one that I did. Spent a little bit more time on it. You can see where I've added texture in her top of her wing. Oh, excuse me, in her wings, in her hair. I've added highlights and shades to her face, added color to every part of her. Check out the layers that I have. I was playing around, like obviously that gets its own layer for whatever reason. I accidentally filled in my outline. with the inside of that. So if I was to turn that off, that's what it looks like. But eventually you've got a variety of different layers that you're working with. And you can turn some of these off. This is pretty cool. If I just turned off my fill colors, I get a drawing that looks like that. If I turned off my outlines, let's turn off the outline, it looks something like that. That's pretty neat. You can get that from there. The reason why I did that was because I selected everything and it didn't select the outline color that I'm working from. This is what I'm looking for though. Play around with the brushes. Play around with the opacity and the changing of the different sizes, hardness, the different styles of brushes that you use. And also pull up your brush presets palette, and that'll give you the ability to change up, change up your shape dynamics and your scattering. Play around if you want to do dual brushes. I will say this, if you do too much to these, it'll slow down Photoshop because it's having to think a lot about how the brush is being done. Just keep it to 1 or 2 or 3 different little changes for it to work really, really well from there. When you are finished, save a Photoshop copy of this. So you can go to File, Save As. You're going to do 2 of them. First one, let it be a Photoshop. Once it's done, I want you to flatten the image. So go to Layer, down to, yeah, there it is, Flatten Image. Discard the hidden layers, that's cool. And then save it as a JPEG once you're finished with that one. And that's the last thing to do. The JPEG is what you're going to upload to Moodle when you're finished. Cool? Alrighty. I'll let y'all get started. The rest of today is just to be able to finish that up. Once you are done with this, if you want to show me any images